What's up, Mike?
How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing very well. It is a beautiful, sunny, warm summer day. It's hard not to be in a good mood, and I get to talk to you for a little while.
It's a very warm, sunny day in Oklahoma. I think.
Oh, it's overshooting, you mean?
Yeah, it took it serious, and I think this is our hottest day of the year. I think so far it's like 102. Heat index is probably gonna be about 112.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it'll be.
Yeah, we're topping at around 70 and like 45% humidity. So it's kind of lovely.
I can tell you one thing. So we're what is today? We're recording this on August 8th, and I'm going to get to see you on the 11th in Indianapolis
on Monday. Yeah,
for the automated shop conference. Is that right?
Task. The automated shop conference.
And I looked at the forecast there, and like the high is like 82 all week. So maybe it's 83 or 84, but a whole lot better than here.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's 20 degrees less.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
Man, Nick, quoting is absolutely killing us right now.
Man, I know. I remember as a kid, I would come home. My dad would just have his head in his hands. He'd be looking over a stack of blueprints, and he would just be so stressed out about quoting. And then when I talk to manufacturing leaders today, it's still such a massive bottleneck for them. On Making Chips, we're always looking for ways to improve processes and make life better for manufacturing leaders. And that's where Paperless Parts comes in.
Yeah, now Paperless Parts is really good. I really like the logic for costing and pricing, customized to my shop, so it's tailor-made to get quotes out faster and easier. They streamline the entire process, taking the complexity out by managing every step of the process in a centralized location.
Yeah, and I know like CMMC and FedRAMP requirements can be super rigorous, but with Paperless Parts, those are all met. And then I like how Paperless Parts tools level up how shops communicate with their buyers. It empowers them to deliver an incredible customer experience.
That's right. So if you're ready to gain valuable time back, increase profitability, generate more revenue, and improve customer satisfaction, check out paperlessparts.com.
Yeah, that's paperlessparts.com. It's quoting made simple, profitable, and powerful. Bam.
Well, today we are continuing our MBA series, and we are talking about a topic that could be pretty boring, inventory and materials management, but it is actually really important, even for a job shop, right? Companies that think that, we don't really keep inventory, and that's more for like OEMs and companies that, just have warehouses full of inventory, but it's actually pretty important for a job shop even. So
yeah, I would say it's kind of sneaky important. Like
that's a good way to put it.
It's way more important than you give it credit for a lot of reasons, financial reasons, workflow reasons. Yeah. So it's, maybe kind of like when we were going to talk about corporate formation, we weren't expecting it to be so fun.
Well, that was partly fun because Nick was there.
Well, that's true. And Nick's not with us today, but yeah, this one should give listeners a lot to think about with how they're kind of managing some of their own stuff.
Yeah, so let's first talk about just some of the basic categories, right? So let's presume we're talking about a job shop, someone like yourself. They do a mix of brand new part numbers. They do hopefully a fair amount of repeat orders as well. They make things out of different types of materials. So maybe bar stock, maybe cut plate, maybe castings or forgings. That probably covers most of it. Could be other types of custom extrusions.
Sure.
Like at our shop, we did a whole family of part numbers that were made out of these custom aluminum extrusions, and we would have to make sure we kept enough of that in stock so we always had enough to make those parts. And then, of course, there's finished goods. Again, depending on the shop, some keep very little. Some keep more, depending on how their customers order and the agreements they have with them. But then there's also things like inventory of, nuts and bolts and cutting tools and other consumables that you might use to make sure you always have enough coolant or whey oil or whatever it might be. So yeah, kind of sneaky important when you realize, oh my gosh, there actually are a lot of categories of things we do need to make sure we have enough of and don't run out. So yeah, even things like workholding, enough soft jaws, enough, vice jaws for your mill or your lathe or whatever. So yeah, let's get into it. So I think it's probably true, and maybe you tell me in your shop, and I'll describe a little bit about what we did at ProCNC. We made a lot of parts out of bar stock and cut plate. Those are probably the two. And, we were, I'd say 80% aluminum, and the rest was a little bit of everything: plastic, stainless, titanium, whatever. But we always did keep, for the common types of parts we made, we would keep some on the shelf, right? And some of those items we would actually catalog, and we put them in what we call our COTS module, commercial off the shelf, where it was actually an inventory item, right? There was a line item for that in the ERP.
Yep.
And then there was plenty of other materials that were just what we called part stock. It was just like, we got this random job out of this sort of obscure size or shape of material. And we didn't want to actually create an inventory item for that, because we were just going to buy some for the job, pretty much use it up, throw out any, remnants, or put them on the shelf for fixture material or whatever. And I know some systems require you for any kind of material to have an inventory item, and sometimes that can get very cluttered over time.
Oh man, I can't imagine
where
if
you
I had to inventory all of them.
Where you have, so you sounds like you do both. You have some materials that you kind of have a part number for, if you will, and others you just randomly buy to the job.
Yeah, so I mean, our norm is definitely the buy to the job. So we definitely take your part stock model.
Mm-hmm.
That is 100% our norm. There are some things when you get into castings and stuff like that we treat a little bit differently, but we generally buy for the run we're doing. Now, one kind of hybrid between the two methods that we use quite a bit is, so there are jobs that we run enough that if I wanted to stock material, I could, right? And I can, and we buy enough of that a year or 6 months or whatever to do mill runs of that material.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with a mill run, we can negotiate a much better rate, right? And it's, I don't know, I don't remember the poundage. I think it depends on mill and that type of stuff. But we've got probably 3 to 5% of our jobs that we buy enough of that on an annual basis to negotiate a mill run. The nice thing on that, so this is where it's kind of a hybrid for us, is we still don't stock it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing this up.
But we work with our vendor.
Yep.
They stock it, and then they still release it to us on a job by job basis. So so I get the benefit of, if I bought it direct on a mill run, I'd save a little bit more money, but I don't have to have all that cash outlay to have a year's worth of that material on my floor. They're doing that. They're financing that float for me.
And the physical side too.
And the physical side. Yeah. I don't have that much room.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, because obviously inventory of raw materials and finished goods even, ties up cash. And if you're buying 2,000 pounds of metal to get a better price per pound, but you have to pay for all of it up front,
right?
And then you have to store it on racks or shelves or whatever. That's a big impact. Like you're going to spend, many thousands of dollars to have that material sit on your shelf.
And think about our cash flow cycles in this industry, right? So if let's just use a calendar year. Let's say, okay, in January, I say I need 5,000 pounds of 1 5/8, 1018, whatever, because I know I'm going to use that in the calendar year. So I buy all that. Then I'm going to have to pay for that in net 30. So in February, I'm spending $15,000. We'll say, whatever that is. But I'm going to do that in 3 or 4 runs throughout the year, that I'm going to use up that material on this part, and I'm getting paid net 30, 60, 90 on that. I could have that cash tied up for, 15, 16 months.
Sure.
Before I get all of it back.
Right.
So for me, it's worth like just working with my vendors to help manage some of my raw material inventory.
And what would you say is like a reasonable calculation for how much more price per pound you might pay a distributor versus the mill direct in order to facilitate that for you?
So I look at that as, the way and I've got formulas. If anybody wants to talk through it, like just shoot me a message and I'll happy to share it. But so we all have a cost of capital, right? So you have the money you might have a line of credit, whatever. Right now, lines of credit are running like 7 to 8% annual interest rates. So your cost of capital on that money is 8%. Whether you have the cash or you're borrowing it, at some point you're going to be floating back and forth between the two. If you're buying it on a credit card, it's 27%, right? I mean, so Your
Yep.
everybody's cost of capital is different. So again, if I go back to that $15,000 scenario, I don't want to pay cash for it right now. And it's probably more like 50 or 60. And when you're really starting to talk about some of these numbers,
Mm-hmm.
your true cost of that, if you buy it now, is that cost of capital, right? So simple math, if let's say your cost of capital was 10% and it's $10,000, it's going to cost you $1,000 to hold that.
Mm-hmm.
If you work with a vendor that's, maybe it's 10,000, they're going to charge you 10.5, right? Now you just split the difference. Like it's going to cost them $500 to hold it, and it's going to cost you $500 more, right? So there's everybody's case would be a little bit different, but that's how I look at it. And and again, when you do that mill run quantity, you're getting quite a bit cheaper to start with. So then if you're just buying per bar, so it's usually the math works out really well. You just have to have a vendor you have a great relationship with and is willing to bring that in and hold it for you for 3 or 4 months at a time or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a great way to think about it. And again, back on the physical side, if you imagine doing that with 10 different materials, not only are you holding up a ton of cash, but now you need to just buy a ton of racking just to hold that material.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you're going to have a couple $100,000 in racking.
Yeah.
Quick.
So it adds up. Yeah. It adds up quick. So yeah, great point about that. So I'd say, the advice is think about the materials that you use frequently. Even consider doing some math on, buying a slightly bigger material that you can make half a dozen different part numbers out of instead of stocking 5 different sizes that's exact, right? You do pay a little bit more, but oftentimes the difference, on a part number basis, if you're selling a $10 part and raw material is $1, but you have a little more universal size of material, so maybe you're paying $1.10 for the material, but you can make 5 different part numbers out of that material as opposed to stocking, 5/8 and 3/4 and 7/8 and 1 inch to minimize your, and then you of course have a slight bit of more machine time to rough that off.
Yeah, but a couple rough passes to take off an extra 1/8 inch.
Yeah,
isn't
not
costing
a big deal.
you that much money.
Yeah. So just something to be cognizant of and think about.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that is one of the things we've done as we look at mill run opportunities. We look at them about once a year. We don't, look at it every week or anything, but we will look at, okay, what did we do last year from 2 inch to 2.5 inch, 3/16 stainless. And what would be the effect of if we just bought all 2.5 for everything between 2 and 2.5?
Yep.
Right.
Sure.
You're adding 1 minute of cycle time and a little bit of cost of material, but if you can do it in a mill run, it's going to offset that additional cost. And it's the other area we do that is, so like we have a couple of bar fed lays with the collet chuck, but we don't have every size of collet.
Right.
So same thing, we'll just look at, okay, well, what all can we make out of 1 inch or 3/4 inch or 2 inch or whatever. So.
Yeah, because then you have less changeovers if you can just keep the collet set up in there. So, there's no one size fits all answer here, but I think the important takeaway is just think about it a little more holistically, crunch some numbers about inventory costs and cycle times and come up with a solution that works good for you, for your shop.
Yep.
So on the physical inventory side, very likely, unless you're serving, I don't know what industry, the fence repair industry, you're probably going to need to have traceability on your materials, right? So, or maybe like Barry doing plumbing, he doesn't care that much.
Right, sure.
He just needs it to be 360 brass or whatever. But a lot of, if you're serving oil and gas, medical, aerospace, defense, semiconductor, very likely your customers are going to want you to maintain traceability.
Sure.
And so it's super important not only to do that because your customers are asking you for that, but it's important because if you then don't keep it, then you could get into the situation where you have to throw out a bunch of material because you can't trace it back to the original source.
Yeah, you just bought a whole bunch of fixturing material.
Yeah.
Or hobby projects.
Yeah, exactly. So, best practice, from the way I think about it is when you get that material in, you immediately scan those certs. right? Don't just like put them in a sleeve and like tape it to the bars.
Right.
That's a recipe for disaster. So, scan that cert, link it into some kind of system, and then make sure that the material itself is noted. I mean, the way I think about it, the most important numbers to have in that for the physical traceability is of marking it is the vendor PO number you bought it on and the line item number if you have multiple lines with that vendor, right? Because if you have that, that is really all you need, assuming you have the certs attached to each of those lines. So if you're using Excel, you could put a hyperlink into each of those. If you're using QuickBooks, I'm sure there's a way to do that.
Sure.
If you're using ProShop, we have a built-in way to attach those certs. And I'm sure lots of other ERPs do it similar way. But yeah, making sure you then, again, vendor PO number, line item number. And then, of course, it's also handy just to probably mark what the material actually is.
Yeah.
Because if you're out there searching for, let's say you get a job and you're like, oh, I'm just going to use something off the shelf. If you actually, organize it by material type, and this gets into other, like some people paint different colors on the end of their bars for different types of materials. 316 is one color, 304 is a different color, or, some other mechanism. Then if you actually can see what the material is, it's much easier to, go to that section of your material area, say, oh, I'm looking for some 2-inch 316. Oh, here's some, I got 10 feet of it. That's enough for this job. So if you have it marked with the appropriate numbers, then you can easily tie it back to the original cert that you bought it on, and you can complete this job without having to buy more material and spend even more money instead of using something up off the shelf that you already have.
Yeah, we basically do that. So if people are listening like, oh, I'm not sure how I would tie it, maybe to your PO or whatever, we do a similar thing. I think Paul's was probably a better suggestion, but because we're on ProShop and because all that material and we're buying material for a job, we actually don't put the vendor PO and line item on it. We put the work order number we ordered against.
Yep.
But with that work order number, I can get to all that same information you just mentioned.
Right. Yeah. And I agree. If you're expecting to consume all of it on that one work order, then yeah, the work order number is plenty sufficient.
Yeah.
And then just a couple of tips on more nuanced here. So, oftentimes we'd buy a big bundle of material that would sit on the rack. We would actually, over the years, we experimented with different types of marking. What we ended up going with was we had just laminated cards with some, that were pre-printed with lamination, of like PO number, line item, material type, maybe you put the cert number if you really want to be extra super duper careful.
Sure.
And those cards would have a little, hole punch in the corner, and we would just use a zip tie, and we had just a variety of different sizes of zip ties, and we would like zip tie it around that bundle. And then as we then would pull a bar, because we, unlike many shops, we didn't saw up all of our materials all at once for a job, right? We were very much in the mindset of this sort of one-piece flow, or what we call bar-to-box process. So rather than having, 10 bars of materials either that we cut up entirely and now you have them in small chunks, and then you, of course, need to then label the box or the crate or the cart that it's sitting on, we would just pull out a bar one at a time and then either use another one of those cards or potentially just write with a Sharpie right on the bar itself as it's sitting in the saw right next to our machine where we cut them one piece at a time. But I guess the real takeaway there is when you do start separating out material from your big bundle, definitely keep those individual bars labeled, right? And of course, it's a requirement for ISO and AS 9100 to always do that. But early on, we experimented with like big rubber bands, and those would just break and fall off. And then you have material tags laying under the bottom of your rack, and you're not actually sure what they go to.
Right.
And then you may need to just throw away a bunch of material.
Yeah, we just paint pen.
Paint pen? Yeah, it's a great method.
Yeah, we paint pen all the material.
So each bar you'd just paint pen it on the end.
And during our receiving inspection, we paint pen it. And then, once it gets cut up, then, maybe if we do have 2 foot left over that we're putting into inventory, we'll carry that work order number over or whatever. Or, we run into a lot of jobs where we're running enough quantity that maybe, when the material came in, we got multiple heat treats for the one. So then separate pallets, with separate, then each one marked with like the last 3 digits of the heat treat number.
Mm-hmm.
So that then we maintain that traceability from this pallet to that pallet, whatever. So.
Yeah. Good. I just want to share one thing, and maybe we can share this picture on social when this comes out. I was visiting a shop down in Seattle once, and in the layout of their shop, they had a bunch of vertical bar storage for 12-foot bars. And it was actually really creative. He actually took so it was kind of slightly leaning back, maybe 5-10 degrees leaning back against the wall. And on the bottom, he had like a machined aluminum plate that was maybe started out like an inch thick. And he literally machined into it a bunch of grooves of different widths, and then engraved right next to the groove, like this is 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, inch and a half, 2 inch. And so it was like a go, no go gauge. And it could hold, depending on the depth of that groove, it might hold 5 or 6 bars or 10 bars if it's small. And it was just an easy way, because they were a job shop. They like to keep a variety of materials so they could always just do a quick job, one-off type of thing. And I just thought it was a really cool way to have this vertical bar storage. Took up almost no floor space.
Sure.
But it was really easy to know. It's like, I'm putting this back, the remainder, I cut off 2 feet of this bar. I'm putting it back here. It doesn't fit into this slot. It's too sloppy in this slot. So this one in the middle is exactly the one it should go in.
So similar, visual that I thought was clever. I was in a shop, I don't know, probably 6 months ago, that does a lot of smaller stuff. I'd say everything they do is under 1 inch bar stock.
Mm-hmm.
And in almost every material you can think of.
Right.
From plastics to stainless to carbons, aluminum, everything. And when I saw their raw storage area, there was, it was just a wall of bins, right? You can hold all of this stuff, right? So you need forklift access or anything like that. You just need to be able to pull out a bar when you need it. But it looked like so random. You got a 1/4 inch bar, and then you had a 1 inch bar, and you have a 2 inch bar, like whatever. It was just this random, and there'd be brass next to aluminum, next to stainless. And I asked, I'm like, have you thought about organizing this? It just, so that like if I need, 5/16 inch aluminum, I just go to aluminum, and then I work my way up to 5/16 and grab what I need.
Yeah.
So, and he said, this is organized. I'm like, how is it organized? And what they did is they deliberately, because they're dealing in such small increments, they deliberately separated anything that could be confused. Right. So you have 1/4 inch next to 1 inch. You're not going to confuse those two when you put them back.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And they're all labeled.
Sure.
This is 1/4 inch 3/16 or whatever.
And they just must have some table that tells them, that cross-references the rack storage location.
Yeah, it was like, this is A12 or, whatever. And anyway, I thought that was interesting too, where it looked like this random, like we just threw it wherever there was space. It wasn't at all. It was actually very deliberate how they laid out, separate sizes. I've even thought about that in our drill cabinets, right? Like,
well, I'm glad you mentioned this, because this is an exact topic that will come up here when we get to the cutting tool topic, because I have strong feelings about this. All right, so let's just wrap up here on physical inventory. Right, obviously maintain that traceability. Come up with a way that you can easily keep things traceable, labeled, organized, so you don't lose traceability of it. I think when it comes to like FIFO and LIFO, first in, first out, or last in, first out, I don't think it matters a huge amount when you're talking about raw materials that aren't going to degrade over, years. But generally, use the old stuff first.
Well, right? The only thing I'll add to that is, because it can matter dramatically. It does definitely.
Finance?
From a finance perspective and your taxes, it can actually have very dramatic effect.
Oh, tell us about that.
Well, I don't want to, because you really need to talk to someone that's a tax professional to do it.
Okay.
But I would definitely advise people, and actually we have a by the numbers. Maybe we can drop that in that, where we touched on this like maybe 6 months ago. But there is some dramatic things you can do with inventory accounting. LIFO, FIFO, whatever the other acronym is. It can have I've seen huge tax swings, like when you change from one to the other. But I think the piece there is like, we'll show notes that by the numbers, but if you are carrying a lot of the takeaway is if you're carrying a lot of inventory, either raw materials or finished goods, you need to be talking to your tax accountant about how you're valuing that inventory with LIFO or FIFO or whatever, because it really can actually have a very dramatic effect from a finance perspective.
Okay. Well, this is why you're here in the episode, to keep us reminding of those important topics that aren't on my mind.
I understand it enough to be dangerous, so I don't really want to give my opinion, because if I'm wrong, I would hate for somebody to get themselves in a tax problem.
Got it. Let's talk for a moment a bit more about the digital side of inventory and WIP too. I think it's not in the title of the episode per se, but it's pretty important.
It's part of inventory.
So yeah, it is. So why does a shop care about keeping track of WIP and finished goods and raw material from an accounting perspective? And
well, it's inventory, right? So it's somewhere between raw material and finished good. You have hard costs of material and you have soft costs of labor that have gone into getting it halfway done or whatever, right? I think most shops don't carry WIP on their balance sheet and on their financials. You can, and a lot of people do, and a lot of people would probably argue you should. If you want real true and accurate, very, very true and accurate financials, you would, because we run into this situation a lot. And because we do track it, probably not to the degree we could and should, but think about, I'm sure everybody's been in this situation where you worked really, really hard all month, but the parts aren't due till next month on the 5th.
Yep.
And you've got 4 weeks of work into these things. You've got all your raw material, you've bought the material and they're shipping on the 2nd or the 3rd or whatever. Well, from a revenue perspective, it looked like you didn't do anything.
Right. It's like a major loss last month.
Yeah. I didn't do anything this month. But in reality, if you're tracking WIP correctly, you'll see, did we produce anything though, right? That's going to show up as we produced a lot of WIP. We just haven't shipped it yet.
Sure.
Now, again, most shops, I don't think most do that. And I wouldn't even sit here and tell you necessarily need to that detailed, but it does give you a better insight to what did we get done over some period of time. Now, where it does matter is if you're in a period of potentially transitioning ownership of your shop, like you're selling it, you're anything like that.
Yep.
It is inventory.
Yeah, it's important.
You want credit for, you and I were talking before recording. On any given day, I've got 30 or 40 jobs running on my floor, all at some stage in the process, right?
Sure.
Well, if I'm looking at potentially selling my shop, I want credit for those 30 or 40 jobs that are somewhere between the saw and shipping desk, right? Because there's a lot of value in those 30 or 40 jobs, even though they haven't shipped yet.
Yeah, if you do bigger work orders and your average lead time is 2 months, then on average, you're going to have 2 months worth of your total revenue in WIP at some point of completion, right? So yeah, we always did that at our shop. We would track, WIP and inventory. And I think it's probably important if you have, some bank covenants you need to keep, telling them about how you're doing on your financials, or if you have partners that you need to keep up to date. And yeah, you do $100,000 job, you ship it on the 2nd, you're not recognizing WIP, and they look at the
all that
financials
work
and
in
you're
the
like,
previous month.
You're like, you just lost $100,000 this month. You're like, no, actually, we have $98,000 worth of WIP.
Right.
And we're waiting to just do the final paperwork and ship it on Tuesday. Right.
Yeah. So it is important to track WIP. I feel, and operationally it gives you, it kind of gives you a look outside of cash. Did we perform this month? Right. Did we hit our efficiency rates? Did we get anything done? Because if you're only looking at revenue, and a bunch didn't ship, you'll think, oh my gosh, we didn't do anything this month.
But isn't it also easier to kind of predict and manage your cash flow if you do WIP tracking? Because
100%.
You know that this job is about to ship, or these 5 jobs are 70, 80, 90% done, and they should convert into cash as soon as we send that invoice and whatever your payment terms are.
And WIP accounting can get very, very difficult. For sure. And we should probably, I should probably make a note to like maybe do a by the numbers on WIP accounting, because it can get very complex, and there's, rules and valuation rules and all that type of stuff you have to follow to stay compliant with like GAAP accounting procedures.
Yep.
But it is, I mean, most people should be tracking it to some degree, right? And not just in their head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we do a lot of very sophisticated WIP calculations pretty easily in ProShop, right?
Yeah.
We take whatever material you've pulled, we take how much labor has been tracked against that job, machine time against that job, and just any moment in time you can see all your WIP, on one screen.
Yeah.
So, and we would always report the delta in WIP and inventory, right, each month for our balance sheet.
Paul, tell me about your trip to Italy.
I went there with the NTMA and we got to tour SMW Autoblok, 2 different facilities. Absolutely blew me away. World class, enormous places. I can't even count how many machines there were, but so much automation. One of the most incredible takeaways for me was the breadth of what they made. I did not know they made so many workholding products and automation products. And I loved watching a big chuck machine a little chuck. So they were machining chucks in huge lathes. I thought that was super fun.
Yeah, you introduced them to me after you came back, and they've been to my shop, and the ideas they have to like breathe new life into some of my machines and the tools and the jobs that we're running was just shocking.
And then one of the coolest things is we're bringing this new automated pallet delivery system, the Hennig workflow, to market. And guess what the interface is? It's SMW 0-point locators. It's really sweet.
We're getting ready to get some of those.
So how do people find SMW Autoblok to look through that massive catalog of products?
It's SMW Autoblok, BLOK.com.
Yeah, get rid of that C. SMW Autoblok, BLOK.com.
All right. Very good. Cycle counting and inventory accuracy. This is an important topic. I think many companies do, a once a year full cycle count, kind of shut everything down and everyone just go count a shelf and bring it back and tally it all up in a spreadsheet. What are some other ways to think about what you do with this area?
Well,
and why it's important to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's first establish the why, right? So again, this could be a major number on your financials, right? I mean, it's going to sit on your balance sheet as inventory.
Mm-hmm.
And, in my case, that's a high 6-figure number any given day, week, month, year, right? So that's a big part of my value of my company is the inventory I have. So we want it to be accurate. I mean, if it was that much money in dollar bills, you'd be counting them, right? So, and you need to think of it as it's that much money in dollar bills, because it is. Just when are you going to convert them to dollar bills? So that's the why. Is it's a big number and it's important. We used to do what I think most businesses across most industries do is once a year you shut down for a day and you count. And I'm sure most of our listeners have a customer that says, don't ship anything on these 4 days at the end of the year, the beginning of the year, because they're doing inventory, right?
Yep.
Or we've all been in the grocery store and you see the do not inventory tags on something. Or I mean, this is it's the world, and that's why everybody does it. It's important, but man, I mean, annual accounts suck. They're just,
nobody likes
terrible. So the more you can, in my opinion, the more you can go to like a cycle count where you're counting, some percentage of the inventory every day, week, month, year, whatever, or day, week, month, maybe quarter. And then, like, again, if we go back to like data systems. So again, we're on ProShop. It's got a very, as part of its inventory function, our internal process is that every time you touch inventory, there's a function within ProShop to verify the inventory. So if you just move the pallet, you click the button to say, yes, I counted them. There's still 15 and I moved them to this other location, and you change that location.
Sure.
So we've been able to now, rather than do this big annual inventory that takes, we have to bring everybody, bring half the crew in on a Saturday, people that want overtime at the end of the year or whatever, and buy pizza and all sweat and get dirty together. And, now, like, we've really been able to shrink that down to we look at the things that we haven't touched in 3 to 6 months, and we are able to only go verify those. So we've now touched everything this year,
Mm-hmm.
but in a one instance, like dive in, do inventory, now we're talking about a couple hours with a couple people
Right. Yeah.
instead of everybody.
Yeah. Well, I think this concept is true for raw material, finished goods, cutting tools, everything. If you can have a system where, by the very nature of someone interacting with that inventory lot, they go to pick out a cutting tool and they can see easily, are there 3 of them in there, or are there 5 of them in there?
Right.
And again, like you said, we have a easy button where you just click the button and it time, date, user stamps it with like, yep, there's 5. I verified this on August 8th at 11 a.m. And then you can easily run a query for whatever system you're talking about. It's like, yeah, we probably don't need to go cycle count that if it's a month from now or a week
Right.
from now or whatever it is. And so if you just get everyone in the habit of being aware, and then not only is it good for not having to do major inventory counts, but it just makes it more accurate. Like
Right.
if you see an inconsistency, you can say, no, there's actually only 3 instead of 5. Hopefully you figure out where those other 2 went, but it will possibly save you from having to, run out of something that you think you have enough of, or, buy more of them when you have plenty. So it's just a good cultural habit.
So a couple of real life examples on the why side. So first of all, one of the main whys that you need to do inventory is that I think in most state and local tax situations, if you have a property tax liability on an annual basis, inventory is part of your property tax calculation.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of cases. I'm sure that's not true across the entire country, but so you don't want to be paying property taxes on a bunch of stuff you don't have.
Of course.
Right? I mean, that's not a good scenario. Or maybe dead inventory. It's sat here for 3 years and like we just need to write this inventory off. But even just from a practical standpoint, like I can give you this example that just happened this week. I got reached out to by a customer that we haven't done stuff for honestly probably a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, hey, can you give me an updated quote on this part level?
Yeah.
And because I had an accurate inventory and I could see the last time it was checked, I had complete confidence in the conversation to say, I actually have 18 of those sitting on my shelf right now. She only wanted 3.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and she wanted an updated price. I said, I can sell you 3 at the same price that we did last time. Or I have 18 sitting on the shelf that I'm happy to make a deal with you on. Like, what are they worth to you? Basically, right? Because you haven't bought them from me in 2 years. 18 is going to take, and you only want 3 now. Right. I don't want 5 years of those on my shelf. Right. And we went back and forth in a couple of emails and she took all 18. Right.
Nice.
So even just, I mean, that's just a good everyday practical purpose of having a good inventory.
So you freed up cash and you reduce the risk of those becoming obsolete because they change revs or they stop making the product. And that's a win-win in so many different ways.
Every scenario. And I did it without ever getting up from my desk.
Even potentially for them too, because they're like, oh, great, we just got a deal on these. And, and you might not get orders for them in the future at the higher price, but it's still take that risk benefit analysis. I'd sell the old inventory every day of the week.
Yeah. And I don't, I mean, you could ask, well, why did you have so many if they're only, I don't know. It was a couple years ago. I don't know why we made so many, but we had that many and I was able to get rid of them. I'd love to take the time to go find out why I had so many extras. Cause
maybe they were ordering 20 a year and then the product. Yeah. They just, that life cycle stopped and now it's spares.
Yeah. That's just a different conversation to have, like why we had so many, but because I knew how many we had and it was readily available and I could trust the number, I was able to go from selling 3 at $200 a piece to selling 18 at 160 or whatever we ended up at. Right. So, I mean, that's a big difference in revenue just on one email.
Yeah. And you freed up a shelf location.
Right.
It's just something you don't need to count anymore.
I don't have to pay taxes on it next year.
Right. Yeah. Well, before we move on from inventory and taxes and value, I know some of the problems that happen when you have, especially when you have a lot of finished goods. So let's just paint the scenario, right? Many shops that don't have a great handle on their finished goods inventory, but they make a lot of parts either on a repeat basis or on an occasional basis. They will, get an order for 100. They'll make 110. They'll only sell the 100 and put the 10 on the shelf just in case they had scrap or in case, and they don't even have a system to even ask the customer, hey, would you take extra 10?
Right.
I think it's good to have a system to ask that question all the time. But then the next time you get an order for 100, you forgot you made 10 extra. You make another 110. And you do this 3 or 4 times, and pretty soon you have 40 or 50 on the shelf in different lots, in different places potentially, and you don't even realize you have them. So you're paying inventory on them. And maybe that some of them have even changed revs and they're completely obsolete, but you're still sitting there on the shelf. You don't realize they're obsolete and you're paying taxes on them. Right. And then you go to sell your shop. You have all this massively overstated value of finished goods that the buyer's probably going to, when they look at all the records, are like, this is like 10-year-old inventory. We are not paying you any, value for that. So you got to write off all this stuff in one big chunk.
Yeah, I always
speak to that.
I always dig in, on an acquisition, we always dig into inventory, and we never give full value on it. First of all, you're never going to get full value on inventory because you're at worst you're going to get kind of like cost, right? So stocking up just to hold it doesn't do you much good. But then, we also always have a obsolete inventory calculation in our valuation model too. We don't. We assume if you've got all this inventory, there's some percentage of it that is not going to sell ever. Right. So that's an excellent point. The other thing, talking about obsolete inventory, that kind of some examples came to mind as you were doing that. When you do have that rev change, if okay, I've got 32 Rev Bs and they just send a PO for Rev C. I mean, I would say several times a year that happens with us, and we go, wait, we still have 32 Rev Bs. Right. Can you take those?
Right.
Oh, yeah, we'll take those this time, but next time we need Rev C.
Sure.
But because we have accurate inventory, we know what Rev it's made to, we can do that. Other times, too, where there is a Rev change, it then also triggers you to go, okay, can we modify Rev B to Rev C? Right? Maybe there's a slightly different hole or a whatever, so that you're not just Rev B's not just trash now. I know I've got those. I can modify them to a Rev C, and they're still good.
Yeah. No, great points, great scenarios, because this is the reality that shops deal with all the time, right? And this just underscores the importance of not overbuilding too much, making sure you have good, accurate records. Yeah, making sure you keep on top of what your actual inventory is. And if you are in the situation where you have blanket orders and contracts with customers to actually build inventory, hopefully you have built into those contracts some safety of, figuring out what your economic build quantity is, again, tying up your cash and your WIP and labor and finished goods, and the safety of, them agreeing to buy X amount of parts. So you don't want to extend yourself too much by saying, hey, we're just going to run the entire year's worth.
Right.
If they're only going to pay for 3 months worth at a time, if they change revs or something happens on their end. So that's always something that's worth considering, because you could really extend yourself if you buy a bunch of material, make a bunch of finished goods, and then they change revs or they cancel the order or something, and you don't have a safety provision that protects you there.
Yeah, calculating run quantities off of a estimated annual usage from a customer could probably be a show in itself. And I don't know that there's a right answer. I mean, I know how we look at it, and I know how other shops look at it, but that's a difficult process. And I mean, I think that's a great point of pulling that into this inventory consideration, because that's tough to figure out what is that like kind of economic run quantity that makes sense. Maybe you do have that commitment for a year. You do know they're going to buy it, but do you make a year's worth at a time, or do you make 3 months worth at a time?
Yeah. And it all depends on the raw material value, how much labor goes into it, the space it takes,
there's
all
a lot of considerations.
Setup times, Yeah, if you're making a $1 part and it takes hours to set up because it's super complicated, you might as well just run out a few hundred,
right?
Even if that's because you're only into it, a few hours of actual runtime and labor once the setup is finished, as opposed to setting it up every quarter or whatever.
Based on that consideration, there's a handful of parts we make that we've been making for 30 years that we used to make on manual machines that would take maybe 45 minutes a piece or something. I don't, it was very manual, obviously. We actually now we run 2 or 3 years of those at a time for the exact reasons you're talking about. It's because we're now running them CNC, maybe on a bar fed lathe. It's just as easy. Like it costs us less to make 200 of them, and they only buy 50 a year or something.
Sure.
But it's just as the cost of making 200 of them is the same as making 50. Right? Like it doesn't. So yeah, there's a few things we actually do have that long term. Like, okay, we got 5 years worth of these now. Now again, you risk obsolescence. I mean, there's a lot of risks to that. But from a cost standpoint, like it's the same price either way. So we've made the decision in those cases, just make them.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Especially if you can run it overnight, come in the morning, you got all your 200 parts. And
right.
Costs you almost nothing in labor besides the machine time and the material.
Right. Yeah. That could be a whole show in itself though. That would be
it sure could. It sure could. Maybe that's a good by the numbers show.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about cutting tools. And so just big picture here, right? Cutting tools are kind of like the heartbeat of a machine shop. If you don't have enough of the right ones at the right time at the right machine, your spindles are sitting idle. Like you just cannot make parts if you don't have cutting tools. And I'm sure it's super common to yourself and to pretty much every listener out there that it's unfortunately too common that you realize you don't have the right tool. Either you can't find it, you just ran out of them. You go to do a setup and you realize there's a custom ground cutter that someone forgot to order, or just an unusual thing you don't stock, and you're just kind of dead in the water, right? And the cost of like overnighting a tool adds up.
Can be 4 times the cost of the tool.
Yeah.
Literally.
But then yeah, absolutely. But the machine downtime is the even greater hidden cost, right?
Yep.
If you hopefully are making $100 to $200 an hour off your machines and you're missing a $20 end mill that's special thread groove or whatever, and you got to spend $80 to ship it overnight early AM, but your machine didn't run for 8 hours. There's $2,000 or 10 hours. That's $10,000 worth of machine time, right. $80 in shipping costs. So extraordinarily important to make sure you have enough tools at the right time. But you don't want to overbuy, right? You don't want to have tens and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cutting tools, which is all too common because there's not great storage systems, and machinists take them and keep them in their toolbox, so they always have a fresh one, and everyone has done that, and pretty soon you have 20 of an end mill that you might consume 3 per year,
right?
But it's just all over the place, and then it happens that you still buy more because you don't realize you have 20 of them,
right?
And the place where they're supposed to be is empty, or it's in another machine, and you don't realize that either. So,
I think we've hit another topic. You could have a show all in itself, right? Is like
for sure.
How to buy tools and but you're absolutely right. And it's so funny to me sometimes when the tool vendors come in, they talk about, oh yeah, we'll sell you this insert at this price instead of this price that you're currently paying or whatever. I've told them all for 7-8 years now, like, I don't care the price of the insert. I care about having the right insert here when I need it. That's where you can provide me value. Right? I need the right tool at the right time. That's it.
That's the 80% of the cost, not the 20% of what you actually pay for it.
And there could be an entire show on it. I mean, so the way a lot of the way we manage our tool inventory is we do consignment. So that's very helpful so we generally have plenty of inventory, certainly for our common items that we pay for on a per use basis. Right. So, but yeah, I mean, inventorying tool, like, so at a high level, people I don't want to buy 2 boxes of those inserts because I'm only going to need a box and one. I need 11 inserts. I don't want to buy 20 or whatever. That's costing you more than you think it is, right? So, but in this conversation, having what you need when you need it is the important thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do that without an inventory tracking system.
Sure.
Or a really good partner.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like someone that's I think I roughly have $100,000 to $120,000 worth of tool inventory in my vending machine.
Mm-hmm.
but that's
But
not.
you only pay for it when you use
But I
it.
only pay it for $11 at a time, right? When I pull out an insert or whatever.
Right.
So again, a good partner that will work with you to do that. I mean, they have that
Mhm.
money invested there,
Sure.
and I might pay a little bit more for that insert than I would if I was buying it on a per use basis.
Mm-hmm.
But I have it when I have the tool I need when I need it. There's value there, so I pay.
sure.
I pay for that value. We were talking before we hit record. I can't sit here and tell you that we do a good job of tool inventory. We are getting better with it. I certainly see the value. I think my team certainly sees the value as well. It's just it's a who and when's going to do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean, it's like everything else. It's just we got to get it done.
It's a catch-22. You're
Right.
so busy.
Right.
Yeah.
Too busy to do it once, but not busy enough to do it twice, whatever. Right. So
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, I mean, tool inventory is probably the bigger topic, honestly, and where you can really gain value in your operations.
Well, I'll just share a little bit of the theory behind the way we think about it. First is that you quote your jobs considering what tools you're going to use, right? And in something where it's an aluminum job or a mild steel where the tools last forever, maybe you're just throwing, a lump sum in there to kind of cover it. Or maybe it's you even consider as part of your overhead if it just really lasts, the tools last pretty much forever. But if it's going to be a big expense, definitely itemize it. And then when you are doing your planning and programming process, we believe it's important to actually have a inventory catalog of every tool that you have in the shop. All right. It's we call it our tool module. And, you know the vendor, all the parameters, the cutting length, the flutes, the helix, the corner round, the chip breaker, the coatings, whatever matters to that application. And then you actually choose the tools that you are gonna, program with. So your programmer, right, as they're programming, they have the system of record, if you will, of what tools are available, and they choose those specific tools, right? Instead of just a general description of like, I just need a 1/2 inch end mill that's at least 1 inch long, right? Because there's dozens of tools that meet that description, and many of them are not a great application, not the perfect tool for your application. So, and then if you aren't specific, you're leaving it up to the machinist to go choose something that kind of meets that general description, and you may not get great performance out of it. It may chatter, it may break more easily, it may fill up, it may not have optimal
or you might be using
speeds.
a $100 end mill when you could be using a $15 end mill.
Absolutely. So being very specific about it is important. And then when you go to set up the job, or even before you set up, we call it the pre-processing part of a job, is, kit the tools, pulling the exact ones that that were specified by the programmer, put them in the right holders with the right extension lengths. We're getting in the weeds here, and then know where those tools are at all times, right? How many are in the bin? How many are in different machines? And we have simple ways of keeping that all tracked. But the real important part of this whole process is that when you do this, you can be predictive about the tools you need before you actually need them. Because I've heard plenty of examples, and I won't bash on vending machines and those kinds of systems. They're fantastic, right? Especially if you have partners that'll just keep them stocked for you and you don't pay for them until you use it. But if you have a culmination of jobs that are going to use a bunch of a certain tool all in the same day or two, even with a vending machine that keeps stocked by a vendor, you could still run out and find yourself with idle spindles. So yeah, if you know what's going to be used for how many parts, and we need 2 Thursdays from now, we're going to need 15 of this end mill all in the same couple day period, you can just buy them in advance and make sure you don't actually run out. So that's an important concept that I think is worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I would say from an operational standpoint, in the subject of inventory, it's the most important thing you can. I mean, you do need material at the machine too, but
of course.
But from a stocking inventory standpoint, like if you were going to focus in one area first, I would have to think good tooling and good inventory management of that would be probably your biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah. And I will definitely admit, though, that it's for many shops, it's just like it's this overwhelming task. They decide to just keep kicking the can down the road, but keep battling the waste of not having it as organized as it probably should be. And So speaking of inventory, I'd want to come back to the physical inventory of tools. So I'm so glad you told that story about the raw materials that seemed all random. I believe that's exactly the way cutting tools should be stored. They should be completely random. They should not be stored next to similar tools. Everyone knows the story or has experienced the story of, two different common scenarios. Yeah, you have your entire drill cabinet right next to each other
in 2,000 increments or whatever.
You grab the wrong drill or a drill, you grab it out of the right bin, but it was put away wrong by someone else.
Yep.
And you go and scrap a part, hopefully you catch it on your first article, but because of that. And then the other scenario is that you have all your tools organized by type and size, right? So you have your Lista cabinet with all your half-inch end mills, right? And you have your half-inch end mills that are 3 flutes and 4 flutes and corner radius. And then you get a new half-inch end mill. And
Where
you want to put it? You want to put it in that drawer, but it's completely full.
Yep.
And people literally shift down, let's buy a new cabinet. Let's shift all the 1 inch to there, the 3/4 down 2 shelves, and they do this shuffling system, every year or two. We're like, oh, we've now have too many half-inch end mills. And so the solution to that is to have a database, with a unique tool ID number. And the way we think about it, that tool number, the number is the location of your storage.
Oh, okay. That's smart.
And the way we did it is we would have, whether it's in Lista cabinets or whether it's in just regular steel shelving with acro bins or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Tool number 1 is in the upper left-hand corner of that rack. And
doesn't matter what's in there. It's just
doesn't matter.
Tool number 1.
Could be a T-slot cutter, could be an end mill, could be a tap, a drill, a reamer, whatever, right? And right next to it is a completely different tool. And then next to that, and next to that. And once you fill up that rack and you're down on number 512, you just start with 513 in the upper left-hand corner of the next rack.
I love that.
And then when you go to search for a tool, you just search for, what size do you need? What length do you need? What corner radius do you need? And boom, I got 3 of them that meet that. You can see the cost. You can see the vendor. You can see how many you have. You're like, oh, I'm going to choose the least expensive one or the one I know works really well in this material. That goes on your list. And then, you're not filling up and having to shift storage over. You're definitely not grabbing the wrong tool because you have a tap next to a reamer. And so you've eliminated all these wastes just by cataloging and having a database of your tools.
Well, and I love that example, and I'll give you a parallel example to it. We haven't talked about workholding and a lot of that type of stuff, but a couple of years ago, we pulled all our workholding. We built we built a fixture room, all this nice shelving, all marked, this row, column, shelf, whatever. And, 6 months, and then you fill it up really quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And, when we put all the shelving in, we're like, oh, this is going to be plenty. And it's full, right? In 3 months. Mm-hmm. Right. And so fast forward 6 months to a year, we're sitting in a shop meeting and we're like, guys, we're hunting too much for fixtures when we have a fixture room. It's right behind you. Mm-hmm. Right. You need to take your fixture and you put it back in there. And their point was, so their argument was, well, the shelves are full or I went to take this back to where I got it from. This is actually the scenario. I got it from B53, right?
Yep.
I went back to B53 and something else was there.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, it doesn't matter. Change the location.
Sure.
Right. So there was that gap in it has a location. So talking about tooling, we have some tooling that, will only run on a couple of our machines. Right. So we don't necessarily have that in the tool room. We have that at that work cell.
Mm-hmm.
But it has a proper location. Right. So it has
for sure.
From an inventory standpoint, I need to know how many I have and where it is. That's the heart of it. And, so don't let yourself or your team get trapped in necessarily it has to be in this specific location. We need to know how many and where it is. It's not always got to go back to where it used to be or anything like that. You just need to, from an inventory standpoint, know how many I've got and where they're located so that you're not searching all over the shop for it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, exactly right. Cutting tools, fixtures, materials, how many do we have and where is it, right?
Right.
And in our fixture module, we have this fairly simple system of, like a 4-position array, right? And it comes default with like, rack and shelf and position from the left and depth or something like that.
Right.
But you could change it to be warehouse A and building, room number 2 or whatever. But yeah, when you need that thing, it's easy to look up where that is. You go find it, you go pull it. Yeah, if someone happens to then poach your spot, when you go put it back, you just add a new one, change it, whatever.
Right.
And then the other thing that someone designed and built years and years and years ago, because we had this exact problem, is that we realized that even this nice storage system we built was completely full, and we're now having to like just throw extra racks here and there. But just like finished goods, there are many fixtures we're never going to use again.
Right.
It was a one-off job. We just put the soft jaws or the fixture on the shelf, thinking we might, but we built a system where, and I don't know if you've seen this, maybe it doesn't come to the level of your attention. If you haven't run a job that's used a fixture in 6 months, it shows up in its own special little query.
I've seen that query. I've never looked at it, but I have seen it on the list.
So we would use that to call customers and say, hey, we haven't ordered this part in a while. We're trying to clear up space on our rack. And sometimes they're like, oh, thank you for reminding me. I actually need some of those. Here's an order. You're like, sweet, that's a win. Or no, we're never going to order those again.
Yeah,
so we recycle the fixture, take out the hardware, whatever, get scrap metal value for it, and free up some valuable storage. Or they may say, yeah, we might in the future. And then we move those into an archive area that's not close to the machines. Maybe it's in the back of the warehouse, but a new location is then identified. And it might sit there for a year until, we decide at that point whether they're going to use them or not.
Well, and as we start to wrap up too, another real life example kind of tied to that. This would be more with your finished goods, but here's another reason. The practicality of keeping a good inventory and reviewing it is, and I've told this story before, but we'll also, when we do our inventory and we get towards that year end, we'll identify things that we think are maybe dead inventory. We'll reach out, and kind of the same way I did with the person that wanted 3, sold them 18. It's like, hey, I've got 6 of these on the shelf. Do you need them? Because otherwise I'm throwing them away because I'm not going to pay taxes on them. Right? You haven't bought them in 2 years. They're out of here. So there's been many, many occasions. I mean, fortunately not tons of occasions, but one specifically I can reference is we had 6 or 7 parts for a customer that we hadn't done work for in a couple of years on the shelf. We called them. It's like, hey, we've got some dead inventory. Can you use these? Or send an email, no response, or maybe even no user found. Like, our contact's not there anymore.
Sure.
So we get a hold of a buyer that says, oh my gosh, you make those? I've been looking for somebody. So the buyer that used to buy those from us had left.
Sure.
They didn't, there was no transfer of tribal knowledge of who we buy these from.
Yeah.
We sold those and we started making them again.
Right. Oh, so that's a beautiful situation.
So these are just practical situations of why you want good inventory beyond the bigger themes of taxes and cash flow management and all those types of things. These are just daily, real life examples that you can build some revenue.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, I think we hopefully covered enough reasons why this is sneaky important.
Yeah.
And even though it doesn't seem super critical or sexy, or you think a job shop doesn't have it or need it, it actually is important. There's lots of reasons why. And hopefully we reveal a few of those today.
Yeah. And, even though Nick wasn't here, we can still make fun of him as expense. The other thing too, is you got to really watch where you put your inventory. Because if you're short like Nick, they won't
put
be
it
able
on
to
a
reach
high
up
shelf.
And count it. And you got to really pay attention to that part of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Or have the wheeling little step system that has Nick's name on it,
Right.
Short guy shelf. he'd be first in line making fun of himself.
He would.
That's what we love about him.
That's right.
So,
manufacturers, what is your biggest headache? Is it measuring, improving profitability, gaining efficiencies with AI and automation, maybe tightening up your cybersecurity, maybe getting your business ready to sell? At CLA, their goal is to know you and help you with challenges like these and more. Every day, CLA helps manufacturers tap into millions in revenue and cost savings like one manufacturer that boosted capacity and revenues by 15 to 20%. Visit claconnect.com to hear real success stories and learn how you can grow your top and bottom line.
All right. Well, let's see here. If you don't keep the right inventory of your raw materials, your tools, and your fixtures, and you don't know where they are if you run out of them, then you can't make chips. And if you're not making chips,
You're not making money.
bam.